Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore a truly mighty event. This is the conjunction between the Sun and its co-ruler of Saturn, which occurs on the 16th of February 2023 at 4:48 p.m. Universal Central Time. Why is this so momentous? It's partly because it won't happen again for another 27 years in this zodiac sign. But also, of course, we've got Pluto set to join Aquarius on the 23rd of March, bringing in a whole new epoch. Only for 11 weeks this year and 38 weeks in 2024. So because Aquarius is very much about how we're all connected together, I feel that this is very important in terms of understanding where we are currently poised. All astrologers can look at individual aspects. That can be valuable. But what's really valuable is being able to see how this relates to the wider context of other planetary influences, eclipses and events to help us get a clearer understanding of where we stand at this precise time. And that's what I'm going to try to achieve today. Now, I'll just tell you how I'm going to structure this video. First of all, I'm going to explain the archetypes of the sign of Aquarius, particularly at this phase in its journey, because it's in the last decan of Aquarius. Obviously, Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius, so Aquarius has a kind of duality to it that I think is often missed. When you read magazines, it often relates to the Uranian influence of Aquarius rather than the Saturnian influence. In fact, they're both very active. Also, what's the energy of the planet of Saturn? What can we understand about that? It does have its strengths, which I'm going to outline, but also its challenges, as we all know. I'm then going to show you the event chart, because it's really important to see that in Universal Central Time and in Placidus, exactly the house that Saturn and the Sun are in, because it's really fascinating, particularly in relation to this week that we are going through. But I'm also going to show you the event chart that we can relate to collectively in terms of the overall zodiac. But please stay with me. I then will go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect on this incredibly momentous event, not least because it's not going to happen again for another 27 years in this sign, and because Aquarius is very much about the future, the direction of travel, this is going to inform us an enormous amount of exactly where we stand. If you're a returning viewer to my channel, thank you so much for joining me again. If you're new here, it's great to have you with us. This is very much a community. Please comment. I interact with each one. Share your experiences. And please like and subscribe. I just need to tell you that if you also give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, I can give you a personal life roadmap that can help you to understand some of the patterns that have been evolving in your existence. Some of these may have been more challenging, some much more hopeful. Gain a much more intimate knowledge of these. But also in my special package of 30% off, you can get your 12-month personal forecast. These charts are totally individual to you, and no 2 charts are the same and can give you searing insights. So first up, let's explore what the Sun in Aquarius means. Aquarius is the 11th zodiac sign. It's an air sign, despite that glyph of the water bearer. That can cause some confusion, particularly if you're new to astrology. It's because Aquarius is very much relating to baptism. It's about the higher truth. Now, Aquarius people, or Aquarius energy, like any other zodiac sign or energy, has its plus sides and its more challenging influences. The sun, in terms of its developmental circuit, is actually in its weakest phase because it's blessed in the sign of Leo, which it rules. Obviously, it's very much to do with warmth, affection, drama, demonstrativeness, and the sun in Aquarius is much cooler, it's much more detached, it's stepping back from things and analysing what they mean. So if you have a strong Aquarius energy in your chart, either through being an Aquarius, or having an ascendant, or having other key planets in Aquarius, or you have quite a lot of 11th house in your natal chart, you will have that natural detachment. But also, this is a sign that's governed by two planets, traditionally Saturn, but in the more modern context, Uranus. Now, when we read these magazines about the basic archetypes of signs, often the writer will relate to Uranus, so quirky, innovative, changeable, can be disruptive, outspoken. But what's the drive behind that Uranus energy? Well, it's the secret of truth. But because of the traditional rulership of Saturn, that's very much about sustaining more established elements of our existence. So it's a fixed sign. So that's why it can confuse people what Aquarius represents. So it's not a water sign, it's an air sign, it's about communication. It's about being progressive, Uranus, but also honouring the parts of the past which are worth preserving. So Aquarius people often have a great and very profound understanding of past relationships, which they may sustain because of a loyalty to the connection they've had in the past. Now, the other contradiction with Aquarius, that Aquarius people can be very individualistic, but this is a sign of the collective. But that doesn't mean to say that we need to stop being ourselves in order to collaborate and cooperate with others. So it's finding a balance, and Aquarius asks us to do that as well. Now, in terms of the part of its cycle it's in the last 10 degrees of the sign of Aquarius, so it's in its third decan, which is sub-ruled by Venus. Venus governs two zodiac signs, Taurus, very much about self-worth, values, money, can be to do with more sensual pleasures and even fashion, but its rulership of Libra is very much about the presentational side of life, so relationships, but the more superficial plane in some ways, can be to do with diplomacy. So this part of Aquarius's journey is generally a little more gentle. But this particular event does coincide or conjuncts a fixed star, and that fixed star is at 27 degrees and 4 minutes. So it's about 40 minutes away from being exact. Guyana. And this is very much about achieving great success. So if your birthday is around the 16th of February, you certainly have opportunities with that fixed star to make a name for yourself. But it can also lead to sudden changes and downfalls. So if you are successful, it's important to respect that success and not take it for granted. We may see someone in the public eye who has a very good public standing who will come into view at this time, and that could be challenged, I feel. Now, Saturn as a planet is said to be a day planet, diurnal, but it's also cold and dry, and this is not meant in terms of sexuality, but in traditional astrology known as a masculine planet. Now, it does have some negatives. It can be very restraining, it can be restrictive, it can slow things down, it can frustrate. Sometimes people with extremely strong Capricornian or Saturnian influences can be a bit thrifty, shy, obdurate. Those are all quite challenging influences, but it also has some amazing positives. Of course, it's the ruler of time. In Greek mythology, Chronos, chronology, time. In Roman astrology, in Roman mythology, Saturn is of course the same influence. So Saturn does govern time and cycles, and that's why, because it's not going to come back to this point for another 27 years, and then on the 29th year the Sun and Saturn come together again, that's why this is such a hugely important event. But going back to those positives, can be very much to do with application, discipline, tenacity, can be very much about setting goals and being ambitious, and if so inclined, to do with leadership. I often find with people who have quite Saturnian charts is that they have a very good sense of humour. Now, what does the conjunction between the Sun and Saturn represent generally? Well, if someone had it in a natal chart, they'd certainly be very pragmatic, but I feel that they may at times suffer from a limitation of energy. So if you're someone who has Saturn on your Sun, then you may have to be very patient and work in a very narrow way towards your targets. If you scatter yourself too thinly, it can mean that you do feel quite frustrated easily and can feel that you're up against it. People with Saturn on the Sun can, and of course it depends on what house the Sun and Saturn would reside in. So if it was in the 12th house, they'd be extremely withdrawn and shy. But also, if it's in the first house, this would be someone who'd want to be an individual, but may have to fight for that quite hard. But certainly when it comes to perseverance and really digging in, these are the type of people who can make progress in a steady, but not necessarily particularly gregarious way. But it can lead at times, the Sun-Saturn conjunction, to low energy and low vitality. And that is something that some people may experience this week. But if you do have this in your chart, I think you are someone who probably has an inherent amount of wisdom. And that's another thing that Saturn possesses that often gets missed because people are so focused on the more challenging parts of its nature. But this particular event does see an ascendant of 23 degrees and 40 minutes in the sign of Leo. And that means that Saturn and the Sun, I'm showing on the screen now the Placidus chart, are in the 7th house of relationships. How about that with Valentine's Day this week? And I think having Saturn in the 7th house can be really quite tough. So if you're someone who has that, you may find collaborating with others, even if you have it in Aquarius, something that you take extremely serious and you don't give away that collaboration quite lightly. But in a relationship situation, because Neptune and Venus are in such a magical alliance this week, I think there will be some astrologers just focusing on that event but excluding this combination. So I feel, this could be a week when partners are very pointed in their conversations, particularly if they don't see a future for the relationship. So Aquarius is very much about future planning. So if you're in a tie, or you have a friendship, or you work with people that you don't find that there is that commonality, I think you could be thinking very seriously about whether you should call time on this association or not, particularly if you feel that people are being very unbending and critical and darn right mean. So also, because the Leo ascendant is, very sunny, it means our expectations in some ways around what we want are going to be heightened, and furthermore by the fact that Venus and Neptune are in that conjunction. But let's look at this event in terms of the event chart starting at 0 degrees on the vernal point. So this is how we can look at the overall zodiac. So of course the Sun and Saturn and that fixed star in the 11th house. Person, kind, the collective, how we collaborate or not, but also our future plans. But let's take a look at where the moon is, because the moon is also, like the Sun in Aquarius, in detriment. It's in the sign of Capricorn. Isn't that interesting? Because of course Saturn is the co-domiciliary ruler of that sign, and it is in a conjunction with Eros and Cupido. Now, in terms of the overall chart, the 10th house, so that could be business, work, relationships. But Venus conjunct Neptune in the solar event chart are in the 12th house of reflection, but also potentially of ends. So we could be feeling very nostalgic for how a relationship used to be, but if we don't feel it shaping up as we want in the here and now, and we don't see a future for it, this is quite a challenging set of influences. Also, ironically, the moon in Capricorn in the Placidus chart is in the 5th house of romance. But Venus conjunct Neptune are in the 8th house of devotion. If you are in a devoted relationship and you are very aware that it's not always perfect, because being realistic in relationships is part of their success, and you don't set your expectations too high, this can be a very interesting event, because I think one of the things that we can do with the Sun conjunct Saturn in the sign of Aquarius is think about our friendships. You know, how much do we have in common? Are we focusing on the things that we don't share in common, but forgetting all the things we could celebrate? And Saturn can bring that cold blast of icy air, which makes us see the downside. So just watch against that. But also in terms of our overall developmental progress as a race, we've gone through a huge Capricornian epoch, which has gone on for the last 15 years. Of course, we've had Mercury in a conjunction with Pluto at the end of last week, and that did see, from my personal observations, some very forceful, dogmatic exchanges between people that weren't necessarily helpful, where people were forgetting that where people were coming from was maybe from a point of principle and a point of decency, and have taken things very personally. So one of the great things about Aquarius, remember, is to be a little bit more detached. So even if things aren't perfect, celebrate the things we have in common, understand that we do need to work in a more collaborative way going forwards, that if we're obsessed only by the material model which has dominated over the last 15 years, this just leads to a lot of breakdown in the fabric of society. And if there's anything that Aquarius rules, it's the concept of society. We all need each other. So I'm not a socialist, but I feel that if we can understand that we are all interlinked, and if COVID didn't teach us that, nothing ever will. We all need to work together to preserve our future prosperity and our future peace of mind. And Aquarius is very much about understanding that friendship, fraternity, collaboration are far more valuable than how much money we've got in the bank. And we could say, in terms of the phase that we're in, that the Sun's combination with Saturn is a culmination event of all the things we've learned through Saturn's journey through the sign of Aquarius since the 20th of March 2020 to the 2nd of August, and then from the 17th of December 2020 through to now. All those lessons we've learned come up to the boil as the Sun meets with Saturn in Aquarius this week. Please see below for each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your sun or your ascendant. The choice is yours. So Aries, I think you're very much attuned to what this event is about. You've had Neptune in your 12th house since 2012, and that's been asking, slowly but surely, a lot of the questions that come up to the boil this week. That is, who can you really rely upon? Who's truly sincere and profoundly committed to you, and who isn't? Now, it's possible that there is someone around you that you're showing an interest in, or you're aware of their interest, and somehow or another there's a little bit of shyness that's stopping it evolve. Perhaps it's someone you've met through your friendship group, and maybe it's you, maybe it's them, and not quite saying what each of you wants at the moment. So that could be quite exciting. But all the experience you've gained in recent years tells you a lot more about what you will accept and what you won't. It's about boundaries. So if you're thinking about your future, whether you're in a relationship, looking for one, or just thinking about your long-term professional situation, do think, could I work with these people in a collaborative and cooperative way which would make me happy? Yes or no. If the first instinct, and remember you're often guided by those, is no, go with that. Taurus, for you the Sun cresting with Saturn in your 10th house is potentially going to see a challenge in your professional situation. Now, because of the rulership of of Venus in a conjunction with Neptune, that's giving you the hope for something really profound to develop. And it could do. There's a really quite well-known astrologer who was talking about Jupiter and Neptune when they came into an exact conjunction in Pisces on the 12th of April last year, and went into his paper saying, look, this is an amazing event for personkind. Meanwhile, obviously Russia was pouring its troops over the border into the Ukraine. We can't just focus on the good bits and not be aware of the whole map, as we say in astrology. So for you, I think if there are some challenges around your professional situation, go back to first base. You know, what are the principles behind what you're trying to do? Because the 11th house is where your ruler is, and the Sun and Saturn is where you're connecting with the wider world. If you've lost sight of what the real meaning of what you're doing is about, then that interface with the world at large is not going to be very easy. So in other words, your motives have to be really pure at this time in order to maximize your progress. If you're just approaching things in a purely success or goal-based way, it could end up being or feeling a rather empty process at the present time. Gemini, for you, the Sun combining with Saturn in your 9th house could bring up some snags around travel, a legal matter, anything to do with expanding your situation. But if you've really been working at these areas over the last couple of years, it could also bring a major breakthrough to pass, and that's exciting. You do have Venus and Neptune in your 10th house. It could be someone that you encounter in a professional situation that kind of gets you thinking a little bit. It may be someone who is quite sweet and gentle, but quite different. They may even be from a different age group to you. Don't dismiss the potential for this connection. So Cancer, for you, the combination of the Sun and Saturn can ask you some important questions about where you're most invested. Now that can be in terms of your stocks and shares as much as your emotions. If where you've been putting the most amount of effort in over the last couple of years is not reaping you the reward or the recognition or benefits you want, I think what Venus and Neptune are asking you to do is to find new imaginative ways to break out. But there could be a sense of it feeling quite stuck or even a little bit scary when it comes to your income. Remember one thing about your sign. You are incredibly durable. You're one of the toughest members of the zodiac. Don't ever forget that. So even if your resources are a little bit limited at the present time, you can find a way forwards, particularly with Venus and Neptune in your 9th house and sharing your water triplicity of your Sun in Cancer. So Leo, the last couple of years may have thrown up some challenging moments. Even if a personal relationship has endured, there may have been other ties where someone was really quite pointed, direct, even brutally honest at times about how they see you, which may have been quite uncomfortable. But what this has done is help you to understand a lot more about your needs, but also where you can set your boundaries, particularly as I feel is likely you've been doing so much to please other people in the previous few years, and maybe it became too much of a habit for some people to take you for granted. The other thing that may have happened with Saturn's transition through Aquarius is that you actually did get into a very committed relationship. And Saturn isn't all black and white, and so it could have worked to your benefit. And this is a bit of a challenge to see how far you've come, but the chances are that if you've worked hard enough at it and you want this tie to succeed, you can keep making progress. But if a tie really has been bumping along the bottom, it could make you think very seriously about leaving it. Virgo, for you, having Saturn in your 6th house the last couple of years has been, asking you to be more mindful of your welfare, your physical welfare. Now, this is ironic because this is an area that you have a particular understanding of, but like us all, we can never stop learning, and part of the strengths of your sign is marginal gain. So you understand that small adjustments and being aware of the detail of things can give you a lot of information to guide your moves more successfully. But if you were taking some shortcuts with the amount of sleep you're getting, your nutrition, the amount of exercise, but apparently to others your life seemed rather perfect, then that may have seen Saturn identify and hone in on some area within your situation where you have had some weaknesses and you have had to refine things a bit more. So there could be a bit more need for that. If you're not enjoying a job, you don't like the people you're working with, I think that's also going to become very clear at this time too. Now, Libra, Saturn going through the 5th house has given you a much greater understanding that for all the good things in life, we have to work at them. You can be a little bit laid back at times. Remember, I've got the ascendant in Libra, and, very much somebody who likes to collaborate well with people. And of course, not everybody is particularly bothered. We live in a society that's much less mindful of good manners and pleasantries than ever we used to. And that's actually been quite challenging for Libra people to kind of come to terms with. So the combination of the Sun and Saturn now is saying to you, look, I feel you've got a clear picture of what you want and what's acceptable. Yes, you can compromise and do things creatively, artistically or romantically that don't quite give you everything you need, but somewhere in the mix you're going to feel a bit unfulfilled. So in other words, you can't kind of sit on the fence. You have to make some decisions and get that fired up side of your nature going, because when you are angry, your cardinality comes out, and that brings more Aries energy into play, I feel. If you're too passive, that's when things don't quite work. So I think this event is just reminding you of the progress you've made, the gains you've had, but also the knowledge you now have to guide future decisions across all those areas. Scorpio. Well, Saturn in the 4th house may have seen you reconstruct a property, move home, make some changes in your abode that have been quite imaginative, but it also may have seen you in accommodation that's not suitable, too small, perhaps too expensive, maybe has got damp, cold. These kind of limitations in a physical sense are all possible with Saturn in the 4th house. However, it may just been in the completely emotional context that you felt things haven't been so good. I think getting the energy of the Sun on Saturn can give you a lot of encouragement of how far you've come, but that combination between Venus and Neptune truly is beautiful, and they are linking with your modern ruler of Pluto, so take that. Sagittarius, I feel that your bluntness has come back to haunt you a little bit over the last couple of years, because people may have out-Sagittariad you by being just as blunt back to how you've been to them. Your bluntness doesn't always reap dividends, because you can be a bit impetuous, because Jupiter is a big planet, but also it's about big energy, and because you're a mutable sign and fiery, it means you can be impulsive. And I think that what Saturn's been asking you to do is to think very carefully before saying what you feel, and then you can structure it in a way that actually people are much more availing to. So this week could see a really big conversation, but it can be a very constructive one. And with Venus and Neptune aligning in your 4th solar house, perhaps also you can make some really important and salient and rather subtle but profound emotional points as well. Capricorn, having Saturn in your second house may have seen your finances hit somewhat of an obstacle. Maybe that was to do with COVID. Maybe it's to do with the energy crisis, the cost of living crisis. Maybe it's to do with something that you were doing before is no longer providing that income stream. But maybe it's none of those things. Maybe Saturn in your second house has just been testing your sense of your own worth. The Sun coming into conjunction with Saturn now, I feel, can help you to see how hard you've worked to get the foundation stronger, whether it's your relationship with yourself or those finances. And as you move forwards, as Saturn moves forwards into your third house, if that foundation is strong, you're really going to do well over the next couple of years. Don't see Saturn as purely a negative thing. If anyone can work with Saturn, it's going to be you, after all. Aquarius, well, of course, this event occurs in your sign. If it's near to your birthday, your solar return, it may be that, yes, you could feel that your energy is a bit limited over the next year. You've just got to use what you've got wisely. For other Aquarius people, I think the battering that your two rulers have given you over the last couple of years, and Pluto being in the 12th house since 2008, means you're just really needing a break from the abrasion of it all. But if you look back over that time, some of the things that have happened and the people who've made way, actually, they just weren't up to scratch. They weren't good enough for you, Aquarius. You're the one that matters. It's a complex job being an Aquarius because, as I mentioned at the outset of this broadcast, Aquarius energy is not all one thing. You know, whether you are someone who's more progressive or more of a traditionalist or a blend of the two, it's not easy being an Aquarius. But I feel that this is a culmination point. It is a test, but also it's an opportunity. I think a lot of deadwood has been cleared out and you're good to go for the next phase of the exciting journey. And with Venus and Neptune in that second house, a surprise financial breakthrough or some kind of affection or a gift or an acknowledgement can absolutely thrill you. Now, Pisces, for you, if you are born at the start of Pisces, then I think the cool wind of Saturn may be something you're beginning to feel. Yes, there may need to be some changes. This 12th house energy is much more psychological. If you have felt you've wanted to be away from people, to hunker down and just have a lot of rest and peace and tranquility over the last couple of years, it wouldn't be a surprise. But equally, you've probably had a crash course on some of your vulnerabilities, fears, and some of your anxieties and complexes. And if you've really worked at those things, you're really prepared now to go into a phase when you're redefining in a more physical and energetic way your individuality. So it just depends where you are. If you're still in one of those phases where, no, I'm absolutely right, there's nothing wrong with me at all, that kind of very British kind of denial thing, I don't necessarily think that's very helpful. If you're seeing things in the round and seeing like everyone else, we all have strengths and weaknesses. There's no shame in the things that we feel fearful or vulnerable about. If we bring them into us, we become a more integrated person. And with Venus and Neptune in your own sign, I think if you open up to someone this week, you might be surprised by how much that connects you both together. But if you keep that hard face going, but there are lots of energies manifesting beneath that, I think life will continue not to give you as much as it could do. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. Please like, comment or subscribe.